Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I guess this is the last talk of the day, so I'm going to try not to bore you so much. I'm going to be as much practical as I can. And thank you so much for having us here, inviting us to do this talk. My name is Renato. I work as a researcher in Open Data Charter. It's an international organization that works with different governments and a network of organizations through the world to open up data, to help them to open up data and to help them in the different stages of the process, with the production, with the publication, with the sharing of the data, and with the reutilization. We work in open data in general, but nowadays we are focusing in some specific topics, some targeted areas. We are working on anti-corruption. That's what I'm going to tell to you today. We're working also on climate change, on gender, and we are starting to work on artificial intelligence and digital rights. I guess in some talks today, open data was mentioned a few times, but just as a reminder of the global principles that the Charter has. When we talk about open data, we talk about data that is open by default. It's that you don't have to go and ask for the data. It should be already open for the governments. Nowadays, we see that there are some access to information laws that have the view of the active transparency, and some of them also include open data in their laws. That's how we think it should be. The data should be timely and comprehensive. We need the data updated, and we need, if I'm doing a research on anti-corruption, or I'm using data to tackle climate change, if the data is for 3 years old, it's not going to be really useful for me. And comprehensive, it's like you need all the data that is related to that topic. Also, we say it should be accessible and usable. When we say that it should be free in an open source license, and it should be machine readable. We say it should be comparable and interoperable, and nowadays we are also adding that it has to be for improved governance and citizen engagement. We think that when we open data, citizens, civil society organizations, universities, journalists, can take the data and give feedback to the government. Also, there's a whole world of the open government that is not seen, that are the internal processes that happens in the public administration. And when we work on open data, we work with a better quality of data inside the government, and every stage of the process starts to work better. And also we are saying for inclusive development and innovation, and it's that the data should be useful to address the challenges, some of the challenges that we are having nowadays. This is just an illustration of maybe you have heard of the stars of open data, the different formats that we have. With one star, we have the PDF, and we go further with in an Excel, a CSV, and the other formats. And when we started working with open data, we developed with Data for Development, that it's a partnership, a partner organization. We developed this view of data impact framework, trying to understand in the different stages that we can work on, going from data production, data sharing, data processing, action, and with the response mechanism. And when we say open by default, we are starting to say that it should be open by default, but also it should be published with a purpose. It should be useful to solve some public problem or some public challenge. One tool that we developed in the organization are the open up guides. We have nowadays 4 open up guides on agriculture, climate action, anti-corruption, and land governance. These are tools that are generally targeted to governments, but can also be used by civil society organizations and activists to push them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the anti-corruption guide. but to push them and to know what to ask for, what can we expect for, which data should be available, which standards we should have. Also, these guides have, well, I'm going to tell you the content. They have the key data sets that in each topic that they must be found. Each guide was co-created by different partnerships or different organizations that work with us. And we also work with partner organizations when we work with a government, so that we can understand the context and what happens in every place. You have the key data sets that each topic should have open, how they could be collected, stored, shared, and published, good data policies and frameworks, including metadata standards and governance frameworks, existing gaps or challenges that we have seen in different cases, and also use cases from real-life examples. We are talking today, I'm going to present you 3 tools that we developed with open data to combat corruption. Why corruption? Because corruption has a devastating impact on the lives of people around the world. It's translated in a bad quality of life for people, because the assets and the budgets are not going to where they should be. So the public services are working in a bad way. And open data is especially useful to fight corruption in different ways. Some examples are it allows us to analyze the tax collection, the public spending and investment, and the evolution of the assets of public officials, for example. We have this open up guide to combat corruption. It has 30 data sets that we have identified that should be that the government should be open on these topics. They are really, it's like a huge world, because there are different types of data. We are going from public procurement to lobbying registration, land tenure, right to information, rule making. It's like we have different types of data. And the guide also associates the data with the different cycles of the anti-corruption. We have some things that works for prevention, some of them works for detection, some for investigation, and some for sanction. We have implemented this guide with Mexico, with Ecuador, and also with Uzbekistan. We are a new organization. We were founded in 2015, so we are just like, we are doing our first steps. And we really say always that when we start to work with the guide, that the context, it really matters. So we really work with local organizations in those places that helps us to understand the context and knows what's happening with the government there. And also we have like these 30 data sets, but we have to understand that each context is different. I don't know, an example, for example, I come from Argentina, and Argentina doesn't have a lobby regulation, so I can't ask for open data because we don't even have a regulation and we don't have the data collection. So it's like we have to understand each context and know what can we work on. Also, the guide has a final part when we share some good practices on reutilization, some innovation challenges, and some stories with data to encourage it. Recently, we have done with Guatemala an innovation challenge with the public procurement data. And there were some teams that came up with solutions on tax information, and were receiving grants to develop their projects. And now I'm going to tell you about 2 other projects. These are a little bit more new. And we have developed it with Open Government Partnership. I guess you may have heard about this global alliance. They are also leading some talks and some workshops here. But basically, it's a platform where governments and civil society organizations and different stakeholders, also private sector and journalists, sit together, and they have like a really a good template, and they make commitments for 2 years just to open up the government. And also then they have an independent mechanism of evaluation and monitoring to see what happened with that commitments. So the origin of this project was really interesting because it was a multi-donor trust fund that OGP had with the World Bank, and it had to be implemented by a consortium of organizations. So we were like a lot of organizations working together, each one with a different role or responsibility. We work with Global Integrity, Open Data for Development, ILDA, that is Iniciativa Latinoamericana for Open Data, and Africa Open Data Network. And here it's what I'm going to tell you is really orientated to OGP commitments, but I think that OGP, if your country or if your city, because OGP works in a national level and also in a subnational level, if you're not in an OGP co-creation process, it can be, I think that these tools are really useful to think in public policy projects and to make them really, really measurable and with clear milestones. So that's why I think they're useful besides, beyond OGP. We detected, we looked on what commitments were working in anti-corruption, and we detected that there was like a problem between the policy goal the commitment was trying to achieve, the problem or the status quo that was detected, and how open data was going to work there. It was not clearly linked with the outcomes and with the outputs. So sometimes the commitment were, yes, open information about assets declaration, and the problem wasn't clear, and it wasn't clear what we were wanting to achieve with that. So as I said, we detected a problem in the design of the commitments, and also in the implementation efforts. Sometimes it's like, yes, okay, we have co-created a commitment, a public policy commitment. Then it's like very difficult to monitor or to evaluate because civil society has more limited resources. And sometimes the commitment was not implemented, and it's like there wasn't a good follow-up of these projects. So what here is what I was telling you, the different organizations that work in that. It was really good because we work with ILDA in Latin America and with AODN in Africa to try to reach and make a consultation process that work better than us, that we have like a more globally view. We reach, this may be not totally updated because there's a new report that OGP is presenting that is called Broken Links. I think there's a talk tomorrow about that. But when we made this, there were 2018 commitments related to anti-corruption, and only 21 have been steered by the IRM, that is the evaluation mechanism of OGP. Only 21 had the potential to make some change. So it's like a really low number. And we also find that when we review the commitments, that only 50% were completely, 61% has a really medium or low specificity. It may say open assets declarations, but it doesn't have any milestone or any indicator to know how they are going to achieve that, or what's the process to get to that place. So that's more or less the problems that we were finding. So with this in mind, we developed together two tools. One is, this is a website. It's called the Roadmap to Fight Corruption. It's an interactive website with different questions. You can enter as a guest and just do the process and answer the questions, or you can enter with your email and you can save the progress and you can then go back to it. But there are questions not orientated to make the commitments, but to know where you are in a specific topic if you want to address a public policy commitment challenge. And for example, if you have the right stakeholders in the table, if you have the right regulation, what do you need first? Before thinking in open data, you may need to do some changes to your law. You may need to have some different stakeholders in the table. So it's an interactive, it's like choose your own adventure. You go through the website and you have like different questions that leads you. And also in each stage, it links you with different resources, academic resources or OGP resources, or different civil society organization resources to work on the topics that you are needing to work. So this is the link to the website. It's not necessary to register. If you want to register, it's just to save the progress. And also, we made a booklet that is called the Commitments Creator. That I say again, even if you are not in an OGP co-creation process, I think this booklet is really useful for to think in commitments and in public policy projects. That has 4 steps and some questions that you should be asking yourself to make a good, a strong public policy commitment. This is really for the audience that are the government agencies that are leading a process if they want to have this. Also for civil society organizations that are interested in advocating and sensitive large groups of decision makers, and for the open data community in general. These are 4 steps guided with 4 questions. I'm going to go briefly in each one. The first thing is that we have to think about, and that was failing, is what is the policy goal that this commitment will address? It's linked to transparency. If the commitment wants to disclose more information, to improve the quality of the information disclosed, well, so it's relevant to transparency. If the commitment wants to create or improve opportunities or capabilities for the public to inform, maybe it's relevant to civic participation. If the commitment wants to improve rules or regulations, it's more relevant to public accountability. Here also you have like examples of commitments, of real commitments of OGP and different resources that are linked. Well, if you print the version, you won't have it linked, but if you have the online version, you have like different resources to work on that. The second step is try to understand what is the corruption problem. Besides open data and besides our objective is what is the status quo? What is the corruption problem? The social, economical, or political problem that this commitment will address. Here you have again a lot of resources and different questions. The corruption risk. How is the corruption risk affecting the effective delivery of public goods and services? What are the root causes? Different problems trying to address these. Different questions trying to address these problems. And the step 3 is just go directly on how open data can help us to address this anti-corruption problem. And here again, we have a lot of resources. There's a good example there. We have like, this is a real commitment of OGP, and it says, this commitment aims to dismantle the opaque management of its infrastructure resources by systematically opening up. It's like we have the problem, and we know how open data can work and help us to achieve that. Opening up infrastructure planning, procurement, and delivery. Why? Because we want to radically improve efficiency, enhance competition, and reduce corruption. Also, it has like this. This is how OGP consider their commitments or their public policy. The public policy projects with this, they call it a SMART methodology. The commitment description has to be specific with the actions that are going to be taken. We have to know if the goals are measurable with indicators and with a clear timeline, if it is achievable, if it's relevant to solve the problem, and if it is time-based. And also it helps us to understand if we have all the stakeholders that we need in the table. And the last step is to think how the commitment will contribute to address the problem. And here we want to think in the outcomes, the outputs, and the impact. And we have like a few examples here. For example, there's one about public procurement. The output, the direct output of the commitment will be a new platform with public procurement data. The outcome will be increased scrutiny on procurement processes by oversight institutions, the media and the citizens and universities and any stakeholder. And the impact would be decrease on the average price of goods and services paid by the government. Also, it has like additional information that you may want to take into consideration if you made a commitment, a public policy commitment like this, with thinking in the budget, thinking in other programs that are already being developed in the government. Sometimes the governments don't have a good communication inside and they work like in different areas, and sometimes there's something happening that is really similar, and we want to take advantage of these efforts that are done with public resources, and also just to link to another plans and sustainable development goals. So here are some proposals on how this tool can be used. It can be used as a booklet with the linked resources, only use the examples, or only use the things that are relevant to your goal. It can be downloaded on the opendatacharter.com resources website. And they are quite new tools. We have used the roadmap to fight anti-corruption with some local governments in Africa. And as far as I know, the booklet has been used for Colombia for some anti-corruption commitments that are now in their action plans, and they are like being good reviewed by the independent mechanism. Here is like more general, but some lessons that we have learned in these 6-7 years that we have been working with open data. It's not only that we have to focus on data interoperability, but also people. It's like when we open the data, we have to think in trying to have in mind how we can encourage the reuse of the data, but also inside of the government, there's like people that are not communicating themselves, and sometimes they are replicating efforts, and they have to be connected. And when we start with these internal processes of open data, it starts to work better. We have reached to the conclusion that the different guides, the climate change, the anti-corruption, and the land guide, are useful for multi-stakeholders conversations because we bring to the table different kind of data sets, different standards that are developed by different organizations, for example, open contracting partnership, global integrity, open ownership. It's like, they all start to play together, and also we bring the local actors that have to understand what's happening in that particular government. Also, we found that it's important to work with the users and have feedback from the beginning to understand if what we are developing is working well. And here we talk a lot about closing the feedback loop. It's like the government opens up information, civil society takes the information, and sometimes makes an application or some other development. And it's great when the information goes back to the government and the government does something about it. I have a good example in Buenos Aires. Some information on sexual education was open, and it was taken by a civil society organization that made a map about sexual education services in the city. And it allowed people to qualify the services, and then that information went back to the government, and they have to like give feedback on that. So that's like what we call close the feedback loop. And also we found that data assessments are really important to manage expectations. We have to really know where we are starting from, which data do we have, what's the quality of that data, and what would be possible to achieve with that. Also, it's really great to have a documentation of the data production process. Sometimes in governments, the public officers change, and we need to have if we have the process really well documented, we can then keep working on that beyond the person. Linked to what I was saying before, open data to promote informed participation, the development of APIs to promote reuse. And also, we know that sometimes working with this kind of stuff is not cheap, so we have to have in mind the resource allocation. And it's really important to monitor progress. Sometimes some open data portals, they don't keep updated, or we develop a platform and the platform is not updated and all the public resources go there, and it doesn't make any sense if it's still if it's not still relevant. So that's more or less what we were thinking of. Well, that's all for now. We keep in touch. The tools are available online, but I'll be around here these days too, so we can keep in touch. Thank you so much.